friends, welcome back. 18 years ago when I got my very first apartment, I could not wait to decorate it. And one of the first things I did was go out and buy a ton of plants. Well, believe it or not, several of those plants I still have alive and thriving. Don't ask me how, but they're doing great. And I'm going to show you which ones in my collection are some of the original OGs. So stay tuned. So first up, friends, we have one of the original aloe plants. One thing about aloes to note is they are very good at propagation. They make lots of babies. So if you look at this pot, you can see there's two main mamas, if you will. This big one, boom, right there, and another one in the back here. This pot's kind of heavy. You can see it right back there. And all of these little spiky ones in the middle are all babies that have formed from these two original aloes of mine. So aloes are one of those plants that you're more likely to kill them by giving them too much love than just setting them and forgetting them. And that's probably the case with this guy, why it's lasted this long. So there you go. Next up, we have a Philodendron Saloon. This guy is a beast. Look at those leaves. Now, this is a plant that tends to be a little bit tricky. So with philodendrons, the key really is a proper balance of light and water. Now, they are a tropical plant, so they do like high humidity. They do like to be watered when dry, but they do not like to sit in standing water. So it has a very delicate root structure that it's a plant that can be very prone to root rot. And if you start to see yellowing leaves or pieces that look like they're kind of dying, there's a good chance it has to do with your watering schedule. So making sure that the plant is completely dry before watering it, and when you do water it, giving it a thorough soaking so all of those roots can get wet. There's a really great tip that I read about watering your philodendrons. If you put them into a bucket and you actually submerge the pot until you don't see any air bubbles coming out anymore, and then you pull that out and you allow it to drain completely, that's how you know that it got a thorough drink. I tend to use that technique myself, but I do it inside the shower where I can allow the plant to soak, and then once the water's drained, I can allow it to drip dry in the shower before carrying it back up into the living room. All right, so that is Philodendron Saloon. It's quite the beauty, isn't it? All right, friends, so next up we have this beautiful watermelon Peppermia, which is, in my opinion, thriving since I've moved it into more of this southern exposure. It does get a little bit of direct light in the height of the day, but for the most part, it's pretty indirect bright light, and it seems to be doing pretty well. This is actually one of my favorite plants just because it's so pretty to look at. I love the bright reddish pink kind of stalks, and of course they call it a watermelon Peppermia. No surprise, because it looks like a watermelon. So if I had to pick one type of plant that is my favorite, it would most definitely be Hoyas. And let me tell you why. So number one, Hoyas are super easy. It's a very hardy plant. It's hard to kind of screw these up. So that's number one. Number two, I just love when they flower. Now, it takes a little bit of time and attention to get a Hoya to flower. Many of them won't actually flower until they're at least 5 years of age, but once they do, it's totally worth the wait. Another tip with Hoyas is if you're having a hard time getting your Hoya to flower, more than likely it's not getting enough sun. So you're going to want to move it into an area where it's getting bright indirect light. Now be careful putting it in somewhere where it's getting full sun. They can get cooked pretty easily. If you have a Hoya and you haven't seen it flower and it seems to be doing well otherwise, try moving it into some brighter light and seeing what happens. So this Hoya in particular is super happy in this wall hanging planter. You can see how this one's kind of starting to grab along my starburst clock. So keep that in mind. Whatever you put it next to, it's gonna try and climb it. Here's another prime example of a happy Hoya. This one is in a hanging basket that I made. It's made out of porcelain. It's got kind of a leather strap. And again, this Hoya is in an area where it gets mostly southern, indirect, bright light. This is one that I have not had flower yet, surprisingly, but I'm hoping soon. It seems to be happy otherwise. It's definitely nice and full. All right, next up we have a Phalaenopsis Peperomioid. My 3-year-old used to walk around saying, Phalaenopsis Peperomioid. It was seriously the cutest thing ever. So this plant is having a little bit of a heyday now. It's kind of trendy, it's very designer. Up until a few years ago, it was actually really hard to find in the States, and now it seems to be everywhere. The Phalaenopsis Peperomioid goes by a few different names. People call it UFO plant, or I've heard it called Chinese money plant. What's really great about this plant is the fact that it self-propagates, and if you look into the container you can see it pretty much just makes babies from the roots. So any of these little guys that are in here, you can take a sharp clean knife, slice down into the roots, cut it off, pluck it out, put it in some water for a couple days and let those fine roots kind of grow, and then stick it back in some soil and give it to a friend. They also call it a friendship plant for that very reason. I have quite a few of these just because they do propagate so easily. This is the newest one that I have, but in no time at all, they start to grow up like almost like a tree, and it gets a broader stalk on it and all these cute little UFO shapes that kind of come off of it. So definitely, if you don't have one of these, they are the hot ticket. All right, so next up we have my 18-year-old Jade. Ooh, this one's got a cracked pot and a railroad spike, which there's a story behind this. Believe it or not, we're gonna leave that in there. Over the years, there's been lots of pieces that have fallen off, but good news about Jades is they're super easy to propagate as well. And you lose a piece, you just stick it in some dirt. And like over here, you just stick it in another pot and it will root and sprout up for you. You can see the little roots that grow. You just stick these in the dirt. Before you know it, you'll have another plant, just like we've got here. So another plant that I want to show you today is this cute little lucky shamrock, and it's lucky for more than one reason. So with shamrocks, the best part about them is they grow from these little tiny bulbs, and if the plant dies, all you have to do is water those bulbs and it will regrow itself. So it's almost like magic. It's seriously so easy. You can't really go wrong. Now, what happens is people kill their shamrocks and they don't realize that and they chuck them out. Well, joke's on them, because all you have to do is water that puppy and it will come right back to life. I promise you. Give it a shot. You're going to be amazed. So you can find these around St. Patty's Day in places like grocery stores. They're more of a gifty item, but they make a great houseplant, and I, for one, love my lucky shamrock. All right, guys, next up is my 18-year-old Croton, which I just tried to transplant a little piece. Oh, look how sad it is. From another plant into this pot. And it's not really taking all that well, but those leaves will fall off and new ones will grow and it will be just fine. But as you can see, this original Croton has grown quite a large stalk at the bottom where it's split off in a couple of different directions. Oh, this poor sad thing just needs to go. And I've got it tied off because it'll eventually kind of grow more into a trunk and be able to support itself. But in the meantime, it's a little top heavy. So since we moved into the new house, this Croton has just been loving the west light in this room. And I would say it's doing pretty darn good. Okay, so this next plant is one that I will admit I personally struggle with. I don't know what I do wrong with rubber plants, but they never seem to last very long in my house. Now, I'm good with plants, but this one, I just don't get it. They never seem to be completely happy. But this one is a replacement from a few that I killed, and so far so good. I've been taking a different approach to watering and watering it more like my philodendron, where I'm soaking it in the shower. Instead of just giving it little drinks, I'm allowing it to get thoroughly wet. So you can take a look. This guy is still in the original pot that it came in because I'm trying to take this and submerge it and see if that makes it happier. So far so good. It definitely had an acclimation period when I first brought it home. It lost quite a few leaves, but it seems to be rallying, so go plant. All right, so the last plant that I'm going to show you today is my Rattlesnake Calathea. And this is one that if you follow my channel, you may have seen. I just recently put it into this larger pot. Well, so far so good. It seems to be acclimating quite well. This is a plant that I keep next to my humidifier because it does tend to get a little bit crispy on the ends in the wintertime with the low humidity that we have here in Michigan. You can see behind me, it's actually quite the snowstorm out there right now. So keeping the humidity in your home high will definitely keep your plants a lot happier. All right, guys, so those are a few of the original plants and a few other ones that I have collected along the way. As always, if you have any questions, you want to talk about plants, you want to talk about home decor, whatever, message me. I would love to get in touch. If you like my videos, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you back here next time.